On the Blood Trail is brought to you by Man Mountain Company. Experience peak flavor.
Oh, freaking smoked them. Gorgeous 4x4, full velvet whitetail. Nothing. We got one. Yes! That is awesome. What a rush. That was crazy, man. How do you like that? Hey, how do you like that? Alrighty, welcome back to another episode. Today I am joined by Ryan Tomuschat.
Oh yeah,
is that correct?
Right on the money.
Okay, from Double Down Outdoors, Ryan is one hunter that I think puts in some of the highest amount of effort for the animals that he gets every year. And the animals that you get are some absolute giants, and I'm looking forward to asking you about some of that stuff. But Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's awesome to finally be doing this with you, and good to be chatting with you again, on something other than just text. So it's good to be here.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing this for probably well over a year. I think it's been at least that long, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, I actually think the first time you mentioned it was when you got stuck in the airport when we were down coming home from the ATA show.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was down hunting. You guys were at the archery show, and yeah, life's been crazy, honestly, since then. There's a pile of stuff that's gone on, a conversation that would probably fill up a couple hours of this podcast, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So you got Double Down Outdoors. We're going to start off talking about that for the people who don't know. How long ago did Double Down start?
So I kicked things off when COVID kind of kicked off. I was still wrenching at that time. I'm a Red Seal off-road heavy-duty mechanic, so that was kind of my entire life leading up to COVID. So we're going on 5 years now, which is really exciting. Yeah, it's been one heck of a roller coaster since things started, starting things off with just a small little Instagram page sharing some of our past hunts. At the time it was like March when we started, so season wasn't in swing or anything, but we've come a long way since then, and having the show on the Sportsman channel now and our presence on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all that fun stuff, it's been great, not to mention the countless people and contacts I've met in this industry, one of them being yourself. So it's been a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, because having come up and doing the filming your hunts and being a show and all of that myself, what was kind of like the inspiration that made you want to do it to start?
Probably the same story you'll hear from a lot of guys that find themselves in this industry. Growing up watching hunting shows with dad in the same living room I'm sitting in right now. It's one of those things that I just saw those guys on TV, and it was just the cornerstone of my childhood. Between watching those shows and hunting with dad and my grandpa, it was, I always wanted to be one of those guys that I was watching on TV. So I saw the chance to do it, and I took it, and here we are. That's kind of what motivated me the most. And there's a lot of things that I take away from those old school shows you'd see, like old school Jim Shockey, Michael Waddell, stuff like that I try and implement in my show today, just with how simple and raw it really is. But I remember, I think I was like 13 or 14 when I would be going out into the field, because I've always just had a passion for like video editing and filming and stuff like that. Me and my buddies, we'd always film ourselves like playing knee hockey and stuff, and out on the ODR, and I'd edit all these dumb little videos of us playing hockey. But one of the first times I ever filmed anything to do with hunting was when I was like 13 or 14, and I was out in the field filming on an iPod of all things, and just trying to film some white-tailed deer with my bow. And, it sucks. I wish I could find that footage today because I would love to look back on, what that kid was filming back then. But that's kind of where everything derives from.
That's awesome. And yeah, I think that is probably a lot of people just seeing it as a dream and wanting to chase what some others have done for years and years, I guess. And growing up watching it, it's so special to kind of be in that sphere, the same place as some of these other moguls in the industry, I guess you would say. And it's just I always think that it's really cool to get to go back and watch your hunts over again and look back at some of the details that maybe you didn't remember until you looked at the video again.
Yeah, oh man, it's such a game changer too. I mean, it's just from the standpoint too of like if you're questioning a shot that you just made, like
Yes.
I think everyone can kind of relate to that. It's so useful. But yeah, when you talk about some of the guys, like some of the people you grew up watching, and you're on the same network as them, and you're in the same, like you say, bubble. It's really cool. Um, but yeah, you meet so many great people doing this, man, and it's such a small community too. I'm sure you've noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Kind of venturing off of this a little bit, you got to go to the ATA show there back in January, I think it was.
yeah.
You would have gotten to meet some of those guys that you grew up watching. What was that like? And was there somebody that stood out?
Yeah, I would say Michael Waddell. That was, I will say, out of the entire trip we had down to St. Louis, like that was the biggest takeaway. It was a 5-second conversation with a guy I have wanted to talk to for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of pushing through the crowd because there was the beer gardens and everyone was all condensed up there. And I kind of bumped into someone by accident. I'm like, oh, my apologies. He turns around, double fist and 2 red solos, and it's Michael Waddell. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. He's like, no problem. Turns around and keeps making his way through the crowd. So I was like, we're packed in there like sardines, and it's just no matter how big they are, it's just guys and gals that want to talk about hunting. They're just people,
Yeah.
and man, like that was, a 5-second conversation of, oh, I'm sorry, that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that's cool. Someday that's probably the top of my list is Michael Waddell. I'd love to get to meet him and Nick and T-Bone and the whole crew there. That would be pretty special. I actually have I don't know if you remember this, but back in the day, I don't know if you can even see this on camera. These Hunter Dan elk,
Yep.
and I got Michael Waddell's signature here. T-Bone signed the butt of the elk, and then I got Nick Munt on here somewhere as well. But that was from my parents when we started the Slager Outdoors thing. They went down to an archery trade show in Columbus, I believe it was, one year, and they got to meet those guys and got that signed and brought it home for us. So I thought that was pretty cool. But someday I would love to get to meet them. That would be a dream come true.
Would you like to have them on the podcast or just kind of sit down and pick their brain in general?
Oh man, to have them on a podcast, that would be beyond my wildest dreams. But to just be able to sit down and have a conversation and pick their brains about hunting and just talk about hunting, like you said, guys that love to talk about hunting, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's the one thing I did notice. It's all they wanted to do. Didn't matter who they were. It was just you're there to talk about hunting, and they loved to. It was great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because like they've taken a passion and turned it into a living.
Mm-hmm.
And not very many people can say that they've done that in life, and that's pretty special.
Oh yeah, it's the dream, man. 100%, it's the dream.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. And I know from personal experience, sometimes trying so hard to get like a kill on camera can actually take away from the fun of hunting.
I will agree with you on that 100%. Brandon and I actually touched on this on the podcast I was on with him yesterday, kind of about like the filming aspect of it and stuff, and like especially with self-filming, man, because that's like 99% of our show is just self-film stuff, right? And the grind that it can be to get self-film kill shots. Like it's It's one
Mm-hmm.
thing to get the animal down and you're stoked about that, but then it's like, okay, I got the kill shot now too. Like this is a double win. Like this is huge,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So it's it is. And like the last little bit that I've been doing, like for my my bow zone hunting here for my muley and my Strathcona whitetail, it's been like no cameras, nothing. I haven't been filming any of it, and that's solely out of choice, just because I've filmed what I needed to film this year. I've got, you know, a lot of great animals, a lot of great episodes under the belt, and so I figured I kind of earned a little bit of a break here, and it's been a nice break. I'll be honest, it's definitely been a nice break.
Yeah, I can imagine the like this year I've gotten a couple of really nice animals on the ground, and I haven't gotten any of them on camera. It's just the way that it goes sometimes, and you can't. It's hard enough sometimes to get things on camera with a cameraman, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like,
Um, no, go ahead.
yeah, I don't know. I know what you're saying with that. Like, it doesn't matter if it's you or the cameraman, because like you're packed in the middle of the bush somewhere. And like the other thing is too is like being able to say no, like just to get the kill shot. That's oh man, that's I'm not very good at it. Like if I understand that you have to get the content to do like to continue being in this industry, but um it's really hard
Mhm.
to say no when you have a shot at a world class animal, and to just be like no, I can't get it on film. Like I can't move
Yeah.
my camera, I can't do anything, right? So
So, like on that topic, I think that the hunting filming industry as a whole has kind of actually shifted a little bit to the point where you can get a shot as long as you have something recorded. Um, and you don't even necessarily have to have the impact on camera, and people will actually still tolerate watching that or enjoy watching that. Because I think about Meat Eater as a prime example. A
mhm.
lot of their shots aren't actually on camera, or um, not very good quality clips of the shots, if you know what I'm saying.
100%.
And
Yeah.
yet it's still extremely popular to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, that's a wicked show with wicked production value. Um, it's
And a huge following.
yeah, huge following for sure, but rightfully so. I mean, they know what they're doing. They've marketed it well, and they make a heck of a show. And Steve Rinella is honestly a very knowledgeable guy too. Like just to sit there and
Yes.
listen to what he has to say, right? Like it's yeah, it's definitely one that you have no problem watching.
Yeah. Um, Back to kind of like your origin story with Double Down. When you started, there was more than just you, right?
Yeah, yeah. I started things off with uh, my best friend at the time, Mark, that I grew up with, and a few months down the road, we opened up to my good buddy Devin Skipton as well, and yeah, things kind of jived, and eventually Mark left. Um, for his own reasons, just when you want to take things to the extent that we have, in all honesty, you got to treat it like a full-time job. Like it's got to be 100% commitment. It's work on top of the work that you're doing at work. So um, he just wasn't able to commit as much as he should have, or and yeah. So then it was Devin and I for a year after that, and then Devin kind of started to see the same thing, like he wasn't able to commit, and it was hard because I was at the time like working a job that gave me a lot of freedom, because I was kind of my own boss where I was working, and so I was able to put in some serious hours. And I understand, like with Devin being in the military at the time, and Mark working in the oil field, like it was really hard for those guys to commit. Um, so eventually we parted ways, and um, I took Double Down on as my own, and since then it's been good because I've had a little bit more freedom with what I do and how I do it, and getting to go to like Southern Ontario, and Saskatchewan, and being able to bring friends and other people outside of Double Down on those trips that I talk about so much to them all the time.
Mhm.
It's been pretty rewarding in that aspect.
No, that's awesome. And then doing it solo has to come with its challenges too, right? And you have to, I would assume, be able to motivate yourself to keep filming everything, even when things aren't going that great, and then taking care of all the production yourself, and that's a big job.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, like, right down to its core, like, I was already doing all of that as it was, in all honesty. So, I mean, it's not like it kind of was something totally new to me, but yeah, like, I guess a big part of it was, having others to kind of, I don't want to say rely on, but maybe fall back on sometimes. Um, just kind of being able to pick their brain on certain things. And like if I was, 2 days into editing an episode, I'd FaceTime them and be like, hey, like, what do you think of this scene, all this stuff. And now it's all just me, myself, and I. So um, but it's good. I mean, it's definitely easier from like the sponsorship perspective to try and supply or accommodate one guy than it would be three. That is one benefit to it, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
but to that point, like, I have a good group around me now, good group of friends and guys that I've met doing this that have actually helped out quite a bit. And yeah, it's been good just through networking.
No, that's fantastic. Now, when it comes to like the grind and keeping yourself motivated, I don't think I know anybody who puts in as much time for their animals as you. Um, your elk this year was 30 something days, right?
Yeah, 36 days this year.
And what was it for your whitetail?
Last year, this year, this year for my whitetail, it was quick, thankfully. I think that one was, I think that one might have only been like 2 weeks. So like 14 days ish. So
Only 14 days, hey?
yeah, but man, anyone listening, I am not that good. It's not like it just happened. Last year I went for, oh, shoot. I started whitetail hunting because I killed my elk last year on September 27th. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I had started whitetail hunting on like September 28th or 29th. And so it was from September 28th or 29th right until November 30th, like every single day and every single night. And I ended up shooting a small 5x5 on the very last day just to get it done. So like yeah, there's times where it drags for sure.
So, like, when you're there and you're hunting and it's dragging on to day 14, day 20, day 25, day 30, whatever it comes out to, do you think that's because you're targeting a specific animal, or is it just because the hunting is that hard?
I I would say that kind of varies in species more or less. Like with elk this year, a good example is definitely this season's bull because I was 100% targeting him and him alone. And I passed up a lot of solid bulls that a lot of people would probably shoot, but it I set a goal for myself, man. I like with the elephant, who for those of you who don't know is a bull that I killed in 2022. Um, that was my prior biggest bull, and then last year's bull was just an average 6x6, high 200s, nothing crazy. And so I wanted to get back to that, mid 300s class bull, and I had one heck of an encounter with this bull out of the gate this season, and like right at the beginning, opening week, and from there on, it was just, this is the bull I'm going after, and I don't care what it takes to get him, I'm gonna do it. But I would say, yeah, like with whitetails, it's a little different because this year I was targeting one specific buck who I definitely believe would be well into Boone if I would have got him. But I have a kind of a soft spot for old, mature, gnarly bush bucks. That's kind of
Yeah,
my
me too.
thing. Yeah, I think everyone does deep down.
Yeah.
But as soon as he popped up on my Reconico cell camera, like I dropped what I was doing and I went after him. And to be honest, I'd probably still be chasing that first buck I was after. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I just know that buck was so smart, and I saw an opportunity on a workable deer in a workable spot on a workable day, and it just happened to work out. So yeah, I would say it varies on species with that.
So another question here. We're going to kind of, I think, rabbit hole a little bit here, but when you say that you had an incredible encounter with that elk that you shot this year right out of the gate, um, how do you go after the same exact bull time and time again, unsuccessfully, and then yet still manage to find success on that same elk down the road?
Honestly, it's luck, man. It's luck. That's the only way I could really sum it up is what it comes down to. It's just that one chance out of 10, 15, 20 you've already had at this thing, and this one time it seems to work out. But I guess you could also say is that once you work them that much, and if you have the opportunity to work them that much, I should say, is that you've kind of figured them out. Like they're learning you as well as you're learning them, right?
Mhm.
So you're kind of learning how to play that chess game with them. And like this bull this year, like there was two great chances before I actually killed him, and the second opportunity I had him was like that should have been it, and that was like September 15th or something. That should have been it, but my
Hmm.
arrow clipped a branch and dropped right at his feet. So um,
Oh, that's terrible.
I don't know. Like I always say, like persistence always prevails, and like you know, people might think it's crazy, and if you're ever in that situation where you're like, man, like I've worked this bull for like 3 hours tonight. I worked him 3 hours last night, and it's just not working out. He won't come under 100. Like I think just being able to overcome that mental block, that physical block, like this bull is gonna slip up eventually. He
Hmm.
will. It's
Yeah.
just a
Well, they're
matter of
just animals
they're
at the
just
end of the day.
yeah, they are, and like he will slip up. So I don't know. I think it's just a matter of getting lucky, and you're in him for so long and you work him for so long, like you just kind of learn what he does, and you get the best of him by using that to your advantage.
So then, on that specific bull, I mean, as much as you want to dive into the story of it, how did you find that success?
Well, I guess kind of backtracking a bit. So for the week leading up to actually getting an arrow in this thing, it was, like he was over in the swamp and he wouldn't come out, but we would sit there and vocalize back and forth all evening long. And the story of the season was every time I would go at him, I would try and get between him and his cows, because originally I was trying to work him solo, try and pull him out and, kind of challenge him, and it wasn't working. So I said, okay, this guy, he's got his harem. If I can get between him and his cows, that's really going to get him going and he's going to commit. But he bested me every single time. He would just push his cows and he'd keep pushing them. And like the one night we went like 2-3 kilometers just chasing this bull, like, and we were vocalizing back and forth the whole time. So like the week leading up to it, it was no different. And so I knew where he was probably going to be crossing the morning that I did end up getting him. Um, and I'll be honest, like my motivation was pretty low at that time, because I was like, well, this is just going to be another morning of calling back and forth with this bull. Like this is, what it's great to be
Hmm.
hearing elk, but I got out late. I ran to town. I put fuel in my truck. Sun's already up. I grabbed a coffee, and I'm like, well, whatever. Let's hope for some late morning luck. And yeah, sure as heck. After I said one heck of a prayer, got my gear on, ran down, and got myself tucked into the spot. I hadn't even got my backpack off yet, and a very big cow was starting to make her way out of the trees at the spot that I thought they were going to cross at. Um, and sure as heck, that's where she's coming out of. And 5 seconds later, I hear like just headgear
Mm-hmm.
banging off of branches, right? And I'm like, okay, good, good. And he folds out of the tree line, and it's just headgear, man, and just this big elk that didn't make a sound. Like he didn't chime up at all that morning. And to his defense, I also didn't call either. Like I had just hadn't even got my backpack off yet, just getting set up. And she came in first. And I'm like, okay, like the wind wasn't to my advantage, but it was at a point where it was like she can get within 60 of me, and then she'll probably catch my scent and bust. So like I got to make a call there. And that's actually exactly what ended up happening. Is she busted, then he busted, and they didn't take off like crazy fast because they didn't know what was up. They just caught a bad scent. And so I make my way across this little, I'd say it's like a 5-acre opening, kind of like this summer fallow type field,
Mm-hmm.
into the tree line that they came out of, because that's right where they ran back to. And yeah, I worked him in the bush, going back and forth, and eventually he gave me a shot through some willow, and the rest was history.
That's fantastic. It's kind of crazy how sometimes you have to call them and they come in screaming, and then other times they come in quiet. Like with elk, it's like you never really know what their mood is, every day.
No, I know they're one of the hardest animals to read, but they're just so great. They are such a magnificent animal.
Absolutely. And I also think the bigger they get, the harder they are to hunt.
For sure. Yeah,
Right. I
absolutely.
mean, that's every animal species, but like elk in particular, like when the elk are younger, I find they like to chase and they like to respond to calls a little bit better, and they like the chaos, whereas the big bulls are more sit down and shut up.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of gotta play the game, like I guess would be a good way to put it, with them a little bit more. Whereas young bulls, you can have some fun with it because they're trying to establish themselves as well. And I saw that a lot this season, where you get a lot of like 3x3s, 4x4s, raghorns, and stuff like that that were trying
Hmm.
to run their own harem. Like they were really trying to establish themselves, and they'd get run off by the bigger guys. But yeah, it's funny you say that because I'm sure you've seen it too. But especially in high pressure hunted area, like high pressure areas, like those big bulls are highly educated, and when you're chasing them
I
with a
think
bow,
sometimes
it's
too,
hard.
they're not even with the herds during the rut.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the thing that deceives a lot of guys. And there's guys that hunt that same area as me that I talk to every day. After I got my bull, they went into my area, and they were trying to hunt because they know there's elk there, and they'd have 15, 20 cows and some raghorns, like a good herd in front of them, and nothing of any size anywhere to be seen. And I'm like, just wait, like they're around, they're just not with the herd. They could be within 200 yards of the herd, but you're totally right when you say that. Like they're not always with the rest of the herd.
No, it's crazy. And the funny part about too is when it's the peak of the rut and they're screaming the hardest, and those monster bulls still aren't with the herds. They're hiding somewhere down in a hole and with their lips closed. It's incredible, and I don't understand how they do the elk thing by not doing the elk thing.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're saying. It's just a mind game, is what it comes down to. I don't
Yes.
understand it. I don't think we will ever understand it, but it's just one of those things that I think that's one of the things that just makes you want to do it so much more, is that they always keep you guessing.
Yeah, it's a chess match.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because like with whitetails, and I mean, you hunted your deer there for 2 weeks this year. Um, you basically figure out their trail, and you sit there and you wait for them to take it. And there's complications and things that go on during that period of time, but it's a lot simpler than hunting elk, just in the fact that deer are patternable. I find with elk that I've always had it where you have 3, 4, 6 trails that they take all the time. And no matter what day, which trail you pick, they take a different one.
Yeah, that seems to be the case a lot of the time. Definitely. Um, it's all situational too on like the landscape you're hunting, because like I know you hunt a lot of big bush for your bulls,
Mm-hmm.
whereas like I don't hunt as much big timber. A lot of it comes down to ag land too, and I find that you can get a pretty good beat on them early season, like early September is when that's about the only time you can really pattern them. Besides, like throughout the summer when they come to the same spot every single day on your cell cam, and then September 1st, it's like where did all the elk go? But um,
Yep.
yeah, it's I'd say that's the only time you can really pattern them. And Brandon and I kind of touched on this last night too. It was like he asked me like, what do you find is harder to hunt, like elk or whitetails? And like my way of thinking in all honesty is that it's harder to kill like a 170-inch whitetail than it is to kill a 300 class bull. And I know that's super controversial and there's going to be some mixed opinions on that, but you can work elk but you can't work whitetails. I mean, you can rattle them, you can bleed at them, do whatever, but like at least with elk, like you have a shot at working them within kill range. Not to say you don't with whitetails, but the amount of encounters that I personally have had with bulls of that caliber, you know, and haven't been able to seal a deal on, but have had a lot more of those encounters than I have with, you know, 170 or higher whitetails.
I would say that you hit the nail on the head. I think that big whitetail bucks might be the hardest animal to kill in the bush.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Right? Like I've been hunting now for, oh boy, let me think here, 17 years, I believe. I've got 2 deer that touch that 170 mark, and it's like 170 and a few eighths, right? They're hard bucks to kill. And I mean, the other part of it too is like a lot of deer don't even make it to 170. People kind of discount that and think that just because your deer was like 130s, 140s, 150s, that you needed to give it another year. Some deer, that's the max that they're ever going to get, right?
Yeah, well, that's the case for like most deer, actually. Yeah, like most
Yeah.
people, if you let deer grow, every single one is just going to grow to 200 inches at its peak. Like, no,
No,
definitely
no,
not.
definitely not. Yeah, we over the years we've had deer on camera. There's one that comes to mind. I passed him up actually. 2 bucks came in one time while I was bow hunting, and I thought the one looked more mature than the other, so I shot it. And the following year, we found the buck that I passed up dead, and his antlers were about the same size as when I passed him up.
Huh. Just peaked right
Yeah,
out.
and I guess I don't know, and that wasn't the first time in that area that we've seen something like that. We had another buck that we were chasing for probably 3 years, and by the time somebody killed that deer, he had to have been 6 or 7 years old, and he maxed out at like 140 inches.
Wow. I mean, that is
Yeah.
like a fairly common thing though, because like around here, like I have multiple bucks that will never break that 150 mark, and that's being truly honest. It's just the genetic is like this really wide set 8 point buck. That seems to be a really common genetic around here. Like wide frame, 8 points with mass, and you know you can cull as
And
many
that's a
of them as you
terrible
want.
genetic too.
It's a terrible genetic, but you see more and more of them every year, um, and nothing you can do about it. You know, you're limited, but I I think, like you say, that's one thing that people have a really hard time understanding is that most whitetails probably won't make it to 170, 180 in their lifetime. They got to have the right genetic to do it.
Yeah, and the other thing too that a lot of people preach is the fact that big genetics almost more often than not come from the does instead of the bucks.
I've heard that before too, and I was never really sure about it, but I can't remember what podcast it was I was listening to, but that was 2 years ago now that I was listening to that, and they kind of jumped into the science of it, and I'm not going to sit here and try and quote anything because I can't, but
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you say that, but like to that point too, like when it comes to whitetail science and strategy and stuff, like most of the stuff you hear about whitetails, like where does it all come from? Like most of the time it comes out of the Midwest United States, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of deters people a little bit too, like guys that are hunting up here in North Central and Southern Alberta, stuff like that, Saskatchewan. Um, you got to learn the bucks in your area, right? That's what it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to. Because like, yeah, they're all whitetails at the end of the day, but bucks in the area that you hunt and bucks in the area that I hunt are going to react totally different. They're all
Yeah,
whitetails, but they're not the
absolutely.
same.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very, very true because farm whitetails have a totally different mindset than what bush whitetails do.
Yeah,
And it's almost like you have to hunt them differently. I feel like when you're hunting bush whitetails, they're a lot more relaxed when it comes to transitioning to food. I find that when you're in the farm area, like as they come to food, it's like they're coming to danger. And I mean, like you've hunted Saskatchewan before, and
mm,
I don't know how it is where you've hunted in Saskatchewan, but I know from my own experience, a lot of times when the deer come into bait, they come in like on high alert because they think they're about to die,
yeah, yeah. That's
right?
kind of what we noticed too. Besides, like the does were actually pretty calm. I think it's because those deer have been baited for so long.
Hmm.
They almost acted like cattle. In all honesty, like they'd
Yeah,
when the quad came in to top up bait, like they'd scatter off the bait, but you'd shine the flashlight and you'd see like 10 sets of eyes, and then the quad would leave and
yeah,
they'd pile back on. But it was the bucks that you're talking about. Like they were definitely on edge.
yeah. I know it's kind of crazy how you're hunting the same animal in the same, even just in Alberta. Like if you went from southern Alberta up to the northern bush country, hunting the same animal, but you have to use different tactics.
Yeah, because like I would say like with bush bucks, and that's kind of what I hunt mainly now, more so than the ag land whitetails. Um, is the bush bucks, they move a heck of a lot more, I would say, than ag land deer. They could be moving through that bush at all hours of the day, whereas ag land deer that have a set food source and have probably
Hmm.
been running the same pattern for seasons on end. They'll go and bed down somewhere for multiple hours in a day. But um, I guess the other thing too is like, what are your thoughts on nocturnal whitetails, like actual nocturnal whitetails? Because that's a fun subject.
Uh, I think it's legitimate to a point. I guess I don't, like you said, it's controversial. I think whitetails, like every other animal, have their cycles.
Hmm.
Um, I think a lot of the time when hunting season rolls around, the too many people rolling around in the bush, um, the 100 times more vehicles up and down every single road, I think that kind of pushes and manipulates the deer movement a lot. Um, I think that forces them to be like, well, I wanted to go out to eat at first light, but now there's 50 vehicles driving down this road. So I'm just going to go out before first light the next day. Right. And I think that they associate the darkness with less noise and less pressure, and they become more comfortable. And that's what creates that appearance of them being nocturnal. But then again, you get into the middle of November, like we're about to come into here, and it's the rut. So anything could happen. The bucks have to run and they have to chase the does, and they don't really have a choice but to stimulate that daytime movement. And so I do think that there are specific deer, like big mature bucks, that refuse to move in the daylight.
Hmm.
Um, but I think every single one of them has that moment of weakness.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree. And I think too many guys rely too heavily on what they're seeing on their trail cameras and cell cameras as well. I know,
Yes.
yeah, like one thing being is that guys will preach that they have a nocturnal buck that they can't get to daylight. And like I believe absolutely deer can be nocturnal for all sorts of reasons. Like, for example, if you have a whitetail that's crossing in front of your camera at like 1:30 in the morning, then it's a pretty safe bet that, yeah, that deer's main movement is at night. But if you have a whitetail that's coming in like 15, 20 minutes, an hour, even 2 hours after legal light, like, odds are that buck's already been moving for 2-3 hours. You're just set up towards the end of what his loop might be. You're not deep enough in.
Yep.
And I think that's one thing that people, don't really understand as much, especially with bush deer. I think that's definitely a big thing with bush bucks is that even though they might be coming in a little bit after dark, like, you just might not be set up deep enough in.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is, like, if you think about it, let's say right around now you got from about 7 o'clock till 5 o'clock is your first light, last light window.
Yeah.
Give or take whatever it is. That's 10 hours in a day, right? And I don't see every single deer in the bush laying in the same spot for 10 hours. I don't think that's possible.
No, I definitely not.
Right. So just because that buck's coming by your camera at 1:30 in the morning, he's moving somewhere before that in daylight. You know what I mean? So I think it comes down to, and a lot of guys don't want to push into like bedding areas and stuff like that and blow the deer out of there.
Yeah.
But you can find a way to set up on the fringe of some of those locations and catch a deer doing something that it wouldn't be where your camera is set up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's just the risk definitely runs higher, obviously, when you start getting into that. But I mean, if it pays off, it pays off, right? It's I know I don't know about you, but I've definitely had times like where total accident, fluke, you bump them out of their bed, and that's the last time you see that buck for that season. So it's high stakes when you start getting into that.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. I know, what was it, a couple years ago, my brother shot a deer, and that deer disappeared for an entire year. We thought that he died and winter killed. And then the night that he got shot was the first night we even knew that he was back.
Wow.
Yeah, an entire season. And didn't winter with the rest of the deer, didn't do the summertime feeding thing with the rest of the deer. And I think it was like, I want to say end of August when season opened, and he happened to walk right by the tree stand, and that was that.
Wow. And that was this
Right.
like the same stand like as before?
Yeah, it was in the same little piece that we were hunting after the same deer, or the same group of deer, and he was one of the ones that went missing.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
what are the odds of that? Holy smokes.
So, and I don't know what pushed him out of there. Well, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's such a pleasant surprise when you walk up on it. And you're like, oh my goodness, he's back. You know?
Yeah.
But like you said, you spook a deer and he's gone for the season, or I guess longer in this case. And I don't even know what it was that pushed that deer out of the area, but eventually he did come back. And sometimes I guess you'd have to wait that long. And you may sit for the rest of the season for that specific deer and never see him again.
Yeah, and I think like that's definitely a challenge that I had last year with why whitetail hunting drug on so long. It was the same exact thing you're talking about. Like, I was sitting for a deer that, in all honesty, just didn't exist at that time. So it was, he was there and then he wasn't, and it happens. That's whitetail hunting, man. Like, if you want to target the big ones and you have your sights set on one very specific buck, like it can be tough. And
you got to pass up a lot of really nice deer to shoot something truly special.
Absolutely. And
right. I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah, it is, because there's like, a guy can only be so good at field judging too. I mean, like, there's been a few times where it's like you look through the binos and you're like, yes, sir. And you get some good ground shrinkage, but like it's just something that it comes with experience, right? Like, the more you do it, the better you're going to be at it, just like anything else on this planet. So
if you're a flavor fanatic, you need this seasoning in your life. Get ready for a taste explosion. Meet the Peak Blend from Man Mountain Company. This isn't just any seasoning. It's the ultimate flavor booster for every dish. Imagine your beef, pork, chicken, or fish bursting with incredible taste. But wait, there's more. Peak Blend is perfect for veggies, eggs, popcorn, fries, and even wild game. It's like having a magic wand in your kitchen. Whether you're grilling, smoking, or just whipping up a quick meal, Peak Blend turns ordinary into extraordinary. Think about it. Every bite, an adventure in flavor. So why settle for bland when you can have the best? Head over to manmountainco.com and order your Peak Blend today. Your taste buds will thank you. Remember, with Peak Blend, every meal is a masterpiece. Don't miss out. Get yours now.
The hard part too, and like you said, you're hunting a lot of big bush country whitetails. They're not coming into a food source most of the time, right? It's not like Saskatchewan where you're sitting over a bait, or
Yep.
a lot of U.S. states where they're bait hunting. And you only get a split-second decision sometimes. And if it is that giant that you're after, you have to make that decision right now. And sometimes it may look like it was the giant, and it turned out it wasn't.
Yeah, that's the really, really hard part about bush hunting big bucks is, like you say, like, especially now you're throwing a camera into the mix, especially when you're self-filming.
Yes.
It's like, not only are you like putting the binos up, double checking, putting the binos down, getting the camera ready, and then whether you're with a bow, which is just another added bonus to the challenge, or with a rifle. But like, you got to make, like, you honestly sometimes, especially in some of the spots that I hunt where you only have like two solid, like, 6 foot wide shooting lanes. It's like you got like 10 seconds to do that entire checklist and then make the shot. Like, it's tough.
Yeah, I know it's near impossible, and like you said, the adding a bow is just another. It's a treat, really. Self-filming while you bow hunt. I think that the majority of the time, unless you're in a tree, it's near impossible.
Oh yeah, like, we've all done it. We've all tried to do it on the ground, and oh boy, it's just challenge.
Most of the time, I just want to leave the camera behind.
Oh man, I hear you. Yeah. I mean,
like, you're monkeying with a tripod, and depending on where you're in the bush, sometimes the tripod's not high enough. Then you got to adjust it, and your bow's falling over on the ground, and it's a never-ending game, right?
oh yeah, there's so many little things that you don't see in the film. It's like all this little stuff that just eats away at you slowly and makes you want to film less and less. But I don't know, like, if you do get it all on film and everything comes together, like, it's all worth it at the end of the day. It's awesome. But yeah, it's it's a challenge.
So, like, you do a lot of self-filming, and I guess because that's Double Down Outdoors is Ryan Tomuschat, so you kind of have to make sure you capture yourself doing everything you do in the woods. Do you enjoy the self-filming part of it, or would you rather have somebody follow you with a camera?
I would definitely, like, love to have someone chase me around with a camera for a lot of it, because I feel like I could interact with the camera more instead of always having to press record myself. Like, I feel like there's a lot of stuff, like, naturally that I miss out on, like, where I could be walking and talking, or just, having some kind of moment of something, and like, it won't be captured because I'm filming at my choice, at my disposal. Someone else isn't rolling the camera when, like, I'm not expecting it. So, that's one thing I find tough with self-filming, is it's, you may not get as much as you want and what you want, but yeah, like, there's just other things too. It's like, now you got to be willing to bring a guy into your hottest hunting spots, and you got to hope you can trust that guy, right? Like, that's a big thing too. Not that that's really an issue, but I don't know.
There's two people moving around too.
Yeah, there's two people moving around. So, like, if you're hunting out of a stand, now you have to have a setup for a cameraman as well, which in some of these bush spots is almost impossible with where you set up. Yeah, I think I would rather self-film just for the challenge and I guess the ability, like, just being feeling like I accomplished something more when I kill something and get it all on film. But I guess for the perspective of maybe having some better content to throw in the show would, yeah, it would be nice to have someone follow me around with a camera from time to time.
That's fair. Um, so then, as a whole, filming and producing and editing and all of that, what in a TV show, there's a lot of things that are involved in creating that. What would you say is the hardest part?
The hardest part is being able to make something that people can really stay attached to throughout the entire thing. You don't want to lose attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the hardest part of doing that is having a show that you're not narrating the whole thing. And like that's a big downfall of mine with our early episodes is that, I was still getting accustomed to like being, I don't want to say lively on camera, but like just kind of talking about what I'm doing more so in the moment while we're filming it in the field, is whereas like I wasn't at that time. So it was like a lot of like, okay, here's a shot of me doing something and now I'm narrating it in the episode, where the season that we have coming out here shortly is just total night and day of everything. It's incredible. I would say like it's just like there's almost next to no narration. It's just watching the episode fall and being in the moment, just listening to me talk about what's going on and being lively and just living in the moment of it, really. I would say that that's definitely the hardest part, as well as like there's so much, like hours and hours and hours of footage for each episode, but
Mm-hmm.
shaving that down into 23 minutes is a real task in itself.
And I find it's hard too because like you have to cut out a lot of stuff that may mean something to you, but somebody else wouldn't care to watch.
Yep, exactly. That's a real challenge because there's times where like you could like I have so much film of it where I turn the camera on and just start rambling, like like when
Mm-hmm.
you're deep into elk hunting and your mind's just going a million different directions. Like I'm going
Yeah.
crazy, but it's stuff like that that it's like I want to film this because this is how I'm feeling, but I know someone watching this, they won't understand and they won't care.
Mm-hmm. So for like people who haven't done the editing and producing of the show, uh, you ever find yourself having, I guess, like the equivalent to a writer's block where you're in the middle of trying to create a story about your hunt and you just can't figure out where to go with it?
Honestly, no, I don't think I've ever had that because I always have. It's something I think about 24/7. Like even like just on my drive out to the field, like before I even kill the animal, I'm always thinking about how am I going to put this episode together. What am I going to
Mm-hmm.
film tonight? How am I feeling? Stuff like that. So like I kind of always I keep myself in check that way. But like there's times where it's like when you are having to shave it down to 23 minutes for TV, like that does get challenging with like trying to keep the story consistent because like you kind of have to jump along a little bit further so you don't get to
Yeah.
the story might not be as detailed as you might want it to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would say from like the writer's block or like any kind of block, like I've never really had that happen yet, just because like I've always had a good amount of footage. But you know, knock on wood, it never happens, but I'm sure it will.
We were talking a little bit, I guess, before we started recording here, and you had said that you had lost like 13 minutes or 15 minutes of an episode one time just because of a computer issue.
Yeah.
Any of us that have done the creating a television product knows that there's some sort of mechanical issue that goes on at some point in time. What would be the worst one you've ever encountered?
Kind of tough because I've had cards go corrupt. That sucks.
Mm-hmm.
That really sucks because there's no getting it back. Once a card goes corrupt, like you're
No.
done. Um, yeah, I would say just like because when you're creating an episode and you're doing it like if I really hit it hard, I can have the fastest I've ever done a full 23-minute episode was 24 hours. That was insane. That was like I
That's
stayed
very
awake
good.
for 24 hours. It was nuts, man. And but when you're in the timeline and you're making that episode at that time and you lose like 15 minutes of footage, like your computer crashes, you can't recreate that. Like the episode is going to look so
No.
much different than the first
Yeah.
time that you get it.
Yeah, and a person doesn't realize either. Like it's not just 15 minutes of footage. It's transitions, it's lighting, it's sound, it's every tiny little thing that goes into making 15 minutes.
Oh yeah, there's so much to it. Like, and that's the tough part, is that you had that vision in your head and you're happy with that product after 15 minutes, and then to lose it
Mm-hmm.
and have to start back at ground zero, like it's tough. And that's what I mean, like that you'll never see that again. That episode will never look the same as what you originally had it. It might look similar, but it won't be the same.
Yeah, I totally get that. I've had that similar kind of thing happen before, where the computer wasn't powerful enough for the footage that it was dealing with,
Yeah.
and then when you go to render, it crashes the program and you lose everything. And after having it crash once or twice, you're like, I'm not even going to bother touching this now, because it's so frustrating losing it and then having to recreate it.
Well, I'll tell you, you get really good at hitting the save button very frequently
Yes.
when you have that happen a couple
Yeah.
times. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
one piece of advice to anyone that might be wanting to get into production is hit save as much as possible. Don't be afraid of
Yep,
that save button.
I totally agree. So then, out of all of the Double Down episodes that you've produced, is there one that off the top of your head is like, yeah, that one's my favorite?
Ooh.
It could be from just the hunt or the production of of the show itself.
Yeah, like I don't know, that's kind of a tough one. I think one of the best memories was like the first episode I ever edited for TV was from our bear hunt in Saskatchewan in 2022 or 2021. Because that one was, I'll be honest, like just came off of a pretty hard breakup, and so I'm hanging out with my brother-in-law at his apartment in the city, and this kid, he loves cameras, he loves filming, he loves gaming too. So he's got this insane computer setup. I'm so jealous.
Mm-hmm.
But it's built so good for editing, and we spent 5 days all in all, like just working together on this episode, and rambling back and forth, like, oh, we could add this, we could add this. And I would say, like, from the production standpoint, like that was probably my favorite one to do, just because Damon and I had so much fun doing it. But the most special one to me right now would probably be, and it's one that wasn't even on TV. It's one that was one of our YouTube exclusives. It was the story of Wide Load, the whitetail one. It was just honestly, in that episode, I didn't even get the footage I wanted. I didn't have enough footage for that one. That was one that I did kind of drop the ball on, but that buck was just so special to me, and that it was sweet. It was just a great story how it all came together. But every episode is in my eyes, it's art. It's and you can ask any producer that does this too. Like, we're all artists in our own way. We all add our own touches to all these episodes, whether we have incredible footage and great production quality, or if it's just something simple and sweet. We all have our own way of doing it, and at the end of the day, we're all proud of it. So it's hard to put a favorite out there.
That's very true.
Yeah, it's quite a rewarding thing.
Yeah, which I know we've talked about elk and whitetails. I guess it might come down to those two, but which animal is the most rewarding to get on camera?
Elk, definitely.
Elk.
Yeah.
And then on the footage aspect of things, I know that like, because technology is always changing, and I don't know about you, but I like to keep an eye on like all the different cameras and whatever else a guy can get for doing all of the filming, and all the equipment that kind of helps making it a more professional, I guess, feel and view for the audience. Like, what do you think is the most important aspect of filming? Is it the quality of the footage itself? Is it the sound? Is it something else?
I wouldn't so much say it's the quality. I think it's the actual, like, it's the footage itself. Like, what are you showcasing? Because there's a lot of times where, like, I scroll through, like, even reels on Instagram or Facebook, and you see just this, like, terrible video filmed on some old Samsung phone of a guy shooting a wild boar or a white-tailed deer, and but they got everything you want in that shot. Like, you could see him drawing back his bow, and it's just his buddy filming him, and it's stuff like that that I'm like, wow, like that, like the quality is not great, but like I'm intrigued. I like watching this. This is good. So like there's definitely tools that have helped, like especially from the self-filming side of things, like those painted arrow mounts that I use for everything now, like the one that goes on my bow and one I have for my tree stand, and all these little
Mhm.
arms and magnets, right? So like I would say that those definitely help with the self-filming, but I would say like the biggest thing is just what you're actually showcasing. It doesn't have to be like 4K footage and super slow motion, like it doesn't have to be anything special. It's just what are you showing and if someone's interested in it or not.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that a lot of people they fail to capture the experience. I think
Mhm.
that's the most important part of it. And I mean, part of it too, like you just mentioned on your story about wide load, sometimes the way that the hunt unfolds, you just don't manage to capture the entire story because whatever reasons you had for that one. I know that I've killed deer before where it was the first time I got in the stand, it was the first deer that walked in, right? And there's not really much of a story to tell there. Um, but it's hard to make a captivating adventure out of that sometimes.
It really is, yeah, and you kind of gotta figure out what are you gonna add to that, because like that wide load episode was no different. Like I killed him on November 2nd, so it was like bam, done, right?
Mm-hmm.
But um, yeah, I
It
mean,
almost makes you almost makes you want to sit for 14 days.
yeah, isn't that the truth? And then you say
Yeah.
that, and then you do, and it's like, man, I really wish I could have just shot this on November 2nd. Like yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
it's never good enough, right?
Yeah, that's funny how that plays out sometimes.
Yeah.
So going forward, I guess as things get bigger and better for Double Down Outdoors, what would be, I guess, a dream hunt? If you could pick one hunt to do in a lifetime, what would it be?
There's always been one in my head um, that I've wanted to do since I was a kid, and that's got to be a caribou hunt. Yep, up in
Yeah,
the Yukon, like that would be a dream. Because you watch, that was one of the things I remember Jim Shockey growing up watching, like Uncharted and stuff like that. Like it was caribou, and I love caribou. I've never hunted them before. It's such a beautiful, just magnificent animal that and I'd love to do it with a bow. I
yeah,
think
that'd be crazy.
it would be insane, man. That's definitely always been the dream.
Do you have an animal in Alberta here that's your favorite to chase?
Yeah, elk. Elk is definitely my favorite animal on this planet to hunt that I've hunted right now. Um, I just find there's just something to be said about being in the middle, like whether it's before, like I think the best is like before legal light when you're out there first getting out of the truck and walking into the field, going to get set up for the day, and there's just bulls screaming all around you. There's
Yeah,
you can't put a price tag on that, man. That's something that you got to experience at least once in your lifetime, because guys that
I
don't elk
agree.
hunt or haven't elk hunted, like they just don't know what it's about. And like I had two of my buddies from Ontario come up here and elk hunt with me this year, and the one guy had elk hunted with me last year, so he was kind of had a feel for it. But my buddy Curtis there, who this was his first time ever hunting elk, he never seen an elk in the wild before either, like just
Hmm.
totally crazy. And man, just seeing his face when that first bull screamed at us, like it, like I say, you can't put a price tag on that.
No, and he'll never forget that moment.
Nope. For as long as he lives, and I'll never forget my first time either. I'm sure you won't either. That
Oh
was
no.
the best, man.
I kind of overlooked the turkey hunting thing in Ontario. A lot of people say that hunting turkeys is like hunting a small version of an elk. Now, having done both of those things, what would your thoughts on that be?
Oh yeah, that is a very true statement. Definitely. They're
Does it get you going quite like an elk does?
It does, honestly, dude. It really does, because like you're calling out to them, right? And you're waiting for that "boo" to come back at you, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's totally similar to elk hunting. It definitely is. And then you get that big tom that comes strutting out like a 330, 340 inch bull doing the same thing, just strutting his stuff. Like,
Hmm.
this is my harem, this is my group, and
That sounds pretty cool.
that's a great hunt. I love turkey hunting, and I hope I get to do it every year for as long as I live. It's a blast.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know, almost had the opportunity to go, I think it was 2 years ago, and something came up and couldn't make it. But someday, man, I want to go after them because it just seems like something unique. And like in every hunting, every animal that you hunt, every experience and every way that you go after that animal is just so unique to that animal. And I'd like to experience that.
Yeah, it's definitely not what a lot of people would expect, like going into it, because like you look at it like, oh, I'm just chasing a bird. Like it's just a
Yes.
bird. That's all it is at the end of the day. But when you're hunting them, it's nothing like that. Like you're setting up decoys and you're trying to work these birds, right? Like you're going after them, and it's that's where I think the similarity between turkey hunting and elk hunting really comes into play. Is that like it's a pretty high tactic game. And I'm lucky that I have those guys down there that are willing to take me, and they have a heck of a lot more knowledge about it than I do. Um, but like you learn a lot, and you learn it really fast about those birds. They're really smart, and they got great vision.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah, they could pick you out. Like yeah, you got to be pretty collected when you're hunting those things.
How doable is that with a bow?
For me, not very doable. I didn't have a great experience with that.
No.
But like it's definitely like it's very doable. It's just it's right moment, right place. Like I got close. I definitely did. My first trip around. But that's why my first trip had drug on so much, is because I was totally committed to getting it done with the bow.
Hmm.
Whereas Devin, when he was with me at that time, like he got his two birds the first 2 days because he was using the shotgun. So just bam
Yeah.
bam, right? And then this time around when we went down this spring, like I just like, okay, like I want to get a good tom on the ground, and I just used the shotgun for it, and it was the same thing, just bam bam done.
Uh, how do they taste?
Really good. They taste awesome. They what we did with them is we just, instead of like doing like a whole turkey, we cut it up into like little turkey nuggets and did like a big, almost
Yeah.
like a fish fry, like that we do back home here.
Yeah.
You just battered them up, deep fried them, and man, it was unreal.
So, like, when a person has an idea in their mind of what turkey tastes like, does it taste similar to that, or is it a little bit different because it's wild?
Um, See, I'm not really too sure, because we battered them up and put so much seasoning on it tasted just like chicken nuggets. So
Okay.
yeah, I can't really comment on that because I've never just eaten like just straight cuts or anything like that off of them. But my experience, yeah, I mean, they taste awesome.
No, that's cool. I've heard a lot of people say they don't taste that good, but then you see all these different recipes and whatnot, and I think, well, they got to be pretty good if people put all that effort into it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then like there's a lot of meat on those birds. Like they can be like up to 25 pounds, some of the bigger ones, right?
Oh
So
wow, really?
yeah.
They look a
Yeah.
lot bigger than that when they're all puffed up and coming at you.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? And they
Huh.
man, like the one tom I killed this year, like I sure wouldn't want to get spurred by one of those things. They're like little velociraptors, man.
So the guys that you go out with there, are they, or have they ever had something like that happen, or do they ever worry about a turkey coming in too aggressive?
Oh man, they've got some stories.
I can imagine if that's something that they've hunted lots.
Yeah, yeah. Like I hear stories from those boys where it's like, um, they'll shoot a turkey and then they'll run up to it to go in and like finish it off or something because it's flopping around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like my buddy Mirsad told me a story about like he got spurred pretty good one time, if I remember the story correctly. But yeah, he was just going to put that bird out, and that thing started kicking at him, and it's like little knives coming at you, and like those spurs are sharp, and they got some kicking power. Like they're a force to be reckoned with. So
Huh.
you hear all kinds of stories about it, and yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that'd be cool to experience, and that's cool. You get to do that every year. Um, if when you get a nice bird, like what do you do with it? Do you get anything done taxidermy wise with it?
I wanted to, but I think I'm gonna save that for when I kill like a really like something super unique or something like just next level. Because like I've killed, I mean, a unicorn I guess was a bearded hen my first year, and then I killed a Jake and
Mm-hmm.
a really good tom this year. Um, so what I did with those is it's actually really simple, and everyone usually just does it themselves. Um, is you cut the back legs off, you dry them out. You can either leave the spurs attached or just have the spurs separate from the legs.
Yeah.
And then you'll just dip, you can just rip the beard out, but it's better to cut the beard off the bird because a lot of the time the beard will fall apart if you just rip it out like down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then with the tail fan is you spread that out and you pin it on like a piece of plywood or a piece of cardboard, and you absolutely douse the, I guess it's the butthole of the bird is where the feathers all meet, but you absolutely cover that in all in borax after you've skinned out all the flesh and all the fat that you can off of, the stems of those feathers, and leave it
Yeah.
for like 2-3 weeks at a time. It'll dry out, and then you can mount it up on the wall, put it on a plaque, something like that. So
Hmm.
that's what I have in my house right now, with all three of my fans, and then I have like the spurs connected to the legs, all dried out, and then all the beards hanging inside of empty shotgun casings next to the tails. So it's pretty cool.
That sounds like a cool display. What would constitute next level turkey then? Is it the beard? Is it the spurs? Like what is it?
Yeah, it would be like a double bearded turkey or something with like extra long spurs, or just a cool tail fan, some cool feather coloring, something like that. Um, Definitely like a double beard or a triple beard would be really cool. Those guys have killed some and
Yeah.
I've seen some. Yeah, that's kind of like what you would compare to like your non-typical whitetail.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I heard this one time, and you'll have to tell me if this is true or not, but turkeys only live for like 3 years.
Man, in all honesty, this is the first time hearing of that too. I'm so green to turkey hunting still, but
I
uh,
just think that, like, you think of deer and all these other animals, and they live for a lot longer than 3 years. I just thought 3 years didn't sound like very much time.
yeah, that doesn't sound like very much time at all, especially for a bird like that. But and it's crazy to think because they like from the time that they go from just an egg to what they progress into like a 25-20 pound bird, right? Like it's nuts. And it's like the one Jake I killed this year, it's Kurt told me after I killed it, he's like, oh yeah, next year that thing will be a tom. And it's like, okay, so I could kind of see where maybe 3-4 years would come into play. But yeah, that does seem short.
What's the difference between a Jake and a Tom?
So a Jake is like a juvenile Tom. Like it's not a fully progressed, not fully mature bird yet. So like with Jakes, they'll be like males, but they won't have fully developed spurs yet.
Okay.
And they'll typically have shorter beards or not fully developed beards. And their tail feathers, if you fan them out, you'll see that the mid feathers are usually, if I remember correctly, it's taller in the middle than it is the outside. Like the middle 3 or 4 feathers are always taller than the rest because the tail fan hasn't fully grown in yet.
Huh, interesting. So then, like other species, would the Jakes be a little bit more rambunctious and willing to come into your calls than what the Toms are?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, actually, we had a good example of that when we were hunting them this year. Is we were the first morning when I did shoot the Jake that I did, is that Jakes, from what I learned this year, is that Jakes will typically like they'll team up and try and beat the wheels off of lone Toms. They're actually like ruthless apparently. And so we were working a Tom in the tree line as we were walking in. We got this Tom chimed up, and so we got set up hoping to work this thing. And then these Jakes come in, and you could just hear them beating the wheels off of this Tom in the bush. And then next thing you know, we see this Tom just scurrying across the field 100 yards out in front of us, running from these Jakes. And then these Jakes, there was 3 of them at the time, just like a mob, just come strutting their stuff into the decoys because they're like, okay, well, we just kicked this Tom out of here. This is our stomping grounds now. And yeah, they came in front of us and I just dumped them, but they were very receptive, but they pair up and they get territorial, not with one another, but with mature Toms.
That's very interesting. There's definitely a level of complexity to hunting them.
Oh yeah, there definitely is. And that again, it's like elk hunting. That's what makes it so much fun, is because you're not just hunting a bird. Like you're not just setting up and shooting geese kind of thing. Like there's a lot of different tactics that go into getting it done.
Huh, that's really interesting. Well, I think we're getting pretty up there, and I'll wind down here a little bit. But one question I wanted to ask you before we were off was having your own TV show, knowing how you got into having your own TV show, for somebody else listening that wants to start their own, what would be your number one piece of advice for them?
Honestly, take the leap. Do it. It's a long road. It's tough, but just stick with it. There's a lot of times where I often think, is this really worth it? And I question that a lot, if it's actually worth it, because it's a very tough business. It's a very competitive industry, and you have to do something different or something above and beyond to go anywhere. So I guess my biggest piece of advice was, if you want to do it, take the leap, but make sure you stick with it and just stay persistent. Persistence always prevails. So, yeah, that would be my piece of advice for anyone that is wanting to get into this line of work or has thought about doing it for some time. It's all persistence and sticking with it.
No, that's fantastic. You said you got mule deer that you're chasing in the bow zone. Is there any other hunts you've got planned for this year, or maybe a big hunt coming up for next year that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, nothing really on the burner besides, once the season closes here, I'm gonna go hammer up some wolf baits and take down some wolves, hopefully, because they are they are alive and well and killing a lot of deer. So it would be really good to knock a few of them out. But other than that, no, it's just going to be some more coyote hunting, and then as we head into 2025, get on the ice and do some fishing.
Nice. You ever killed a wolf?
No, not yet. It was funny. I definitely had the chance to. My wolf bait last year was very good, and they were daylighting extremely well, all while I was in St. Louis. So,
Of course, yeah.
of course, yeah. And between the birds and the wolves, by the time I got back, that bait was dried right up. And some of those more remote baits, it's pretty tough to get stuff out there. So I just pulled the pin. But I'm going back to the same spot this year, and I wanna revisit that and have a second chance with some of those wolves.
Oh, I've heard there's a real science to that. Like guys like to wear the exact same clothes in and out to it every time, and you have to use very, very fresh meat or scraps or whatever it is that you're using. Is that what about how you did it?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
I went quantity over quality with that for sure.
Yeah.
I threw as much of it out there as I could, and like I did it on like a big open body of water, just an isolated little
Hmm.
lake, and then like drilled a lot of it into the ice so that the meat froze and the birds couldn't pick it off as well. But like yeah, like my experience was there's definitely a science to it. Like you gotta play it safe, and like we were set up like 200 yards away from the bait, like not close at all. We didn't want those wolves to know we were there at all. But it's good because I have a lot of buddies who wolf hunt as well, so they've been giving me a lot of good information. A good buddy of mine,
Hmm.
Bjorn, he's a killing machine with that stuff, so he's helped me out a lot. Um, but it's one of those things. I'm sure if we revisit this, a year from now, I'll be telling you something totally different. So
Oh, and I hope we do.
yeah, me too.
No kidding. I know I've never done the baiting for wolves thing. Um, I have killed one wolf, but that was while elk hunting, so it was a totally different situation.
Oh, that's sweet. What was it? What kind of wolf was it? What color?
It was just a gray wolf. I would show it to you, but my taxidermist, quote unquote, lost it. So
Oh no.
yeah, he didn't even tell me he lost it. It's been 11 years, so he lost it. But yeah, so and I shot it with a bow. So that's a bit of a kick to the crotch that I didn't
No
get it back.
way.
Yeah. Yeah, I was sitting in a tree stand hunting for elk, and there was a bull bugled, and this was also on Friday the 13th, which is just a cool little bit of information.
Yeah.
But this bull bugled, and I'm sitting in the tree stand where I was hoping these elk would come out in the corner of this field, and I was like, oh, you know what? Elk are crazy. I'll cow call, and if he's wanting to come in, he'll be here right away. And so I hit the hoochie mama a couple times, and I'm sitting there waiting and waiting, and I saw a flash of something in the brush in the corner of the field just a little further in from where I was sitting, and I was like, that was it a coyote? And I was like, no, it looked too big to be a coyote, and the color seemed a little bit weird. And then I saw it move again, and I was like, oh, no way, there's two wolves. And so I thought, well, they obviously think they're looking for an elk, so I hit the hoochie mama call again, and they ran up to the edge of the field. And at that point, they're probably like 80, 90 yards. And so I'm holding my bow and I'm ready. I'm like, okay, well, let's try this again. Cow called again, and they started running right out in front of my tree stand on the edge of the field. And so I came to full draw and I whistled, and they both stopped. And I guessed the one that was further away was the bigger one. And I had it guessed at about 40 yards, took my shot. I think I double lung and livered the wolf. And in two snaps of a finger, the thing was 200 yards out into the field and stone cold dead.
No way.
Yeah. And the funny thing, too, was when I shot it, and by the time it made it 100 yards out, the other wolf was very, very confused and started like yipping and bouncing up and down because it thought they were hunting. It couldn't understand why the other one took off. And the reason that I knew that the one I shot was dead was because the other one went out into the middle of the field and it wouldn't leave. And so I was like, well, obviously the other one's laying dead right there. But I think what it was two juveniles from the herd that weren't with, or from the pack that weren't with the pack anymore. And they were out looking for their own food. But after I had skinned that wolf out, he actually had a pretty sizable wound underneath on his stomach. So I think he got in a pretty good fight before he got kicked out.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I have, it's not right next to me. I have the skull still, but I don't have the hide.
Oh man, that's really too bad. That's
Yeah.
oh, that sucks.
Yeah. But I don't know very many people that have killed a wolf with their bow, so I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think in your lifetime you wouldn't even be able to count on one finger on one hand how many people like that's a super rare thing, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard enough to find wolves, period, right? So to get a shot at one and then a shot with a bow, it's would be sure be nice to have a rug to look at, but it is what it is, I guess. I still have that memory for the rest of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like if you look up any videos on YouTube of wolf hunting, like I mean, good luck finding one with a bow. Like that's tough stuff.
I
Wow.
know. I think Tim Wells is probably the only one that I could think of off the top of my head, and that
Yeah,
guy, he's insane,
what
man.
hasn't Tim Wells done though? Let's be honest.
Did you see the video of him spearing that moose?
Yes.
That guy is insane.
Oh man. It's like he's one of those
He's
guys that he's done so much he just pops up on my Facebook reels with the most random thing like we're blow darting baboons today. It's like,
You ever see the
wow.
one where he blow darts that animal and he's hiding in the water?
Yeah, he comes up
He
with
just
a
like
crocodile.
yeah, pops up and boom, you're dead.
Oh.
I know, and his narrations are the best too. That guy's a legend. He's like the Chuck Norris of the hunting industry or something like that, you know?
Yes, that is like the best way you could describe that man. He's the Chuck Norris of the hunting industry.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Man, Ryan, I'm glad that we got to have a chat on here. I know it's been long overdue, and I'm looking forward to having many more in the future here. I'm sure you and I could talk hunting for hours upon hours. Everybody can go follow you at Double Down Outdoors on Instagram. Check you out on Facebook. Check you out on YouTube. Your old episodes are all on YouTube now, right?
Yeah, yeah, and there's as of January, we're gonna have about 9 new episodes hitting, plus whatever I decide to put on YouTube additionally this year. So be on the lookout for that as well.
No, that's fantastic, man. I'm looking forward to seeing it myself. Thanks again for taking the time to sit on this podcast, and I hope everybody enjoyed listening to it. And until next time, you know what they say.
Oh, that joke will never get old. Thanks for having me, Matt.
No, we'll explain that another time too.
Yeah, that's
you
a story
betcha.
for another day. Yeah, thanks for having me, dude.
On the Blood Trail has been brought to you by Man Mountain Company. Experience peak flavor and use code BLOODTRAIL to save on your next order over at manmountainco.com.